Welcome to One-Weighted Machines and the B7 RS4 series. Today we'll be covering the low pressure fuel pump issues with the B7 RS4, and this particular RS4 is experiencing a low pressure fuel pump issue. We will also show you what that problem sounds like later on in this video. The low pressure fuel pump has a fuel line that runs from the fuel pump in the back all the way up to the front of the car to feed the high pressure fuel pumps. This fuel line holds fuel pressure, and when the fuel pressure drops, you're going to have a rough start. The low pressure fuel pump for the B7 RS4 is located underneath the rear bench seat. Inside of the fuel pump assembly, there is a one-way valve that holds pressure inside of the fuel line that feeds the high pressure pumps. This one-way valve fails and fuel drains back into the tank when the car sits for a long period of time, and that results in rough starts. After an initial rough cold start, you can turn the car on and off many times during the day and it'll function completely normally, as the fuel will be inside of that line and the fuel pressure will be built up. So it's not something that manifests itself all the time, but it is something to replace as soon as you can. Once the car is up to temperature, it will run normally driving wise. This particular RS4 has been sitting for about a month and a half, and the next clip will be the first start. If the car would have been sitting for another 2 months, we would have sprayed fogging oil into the cylinders before starting. When the car has a failing low pressure fuel pump in this form, you're going to have to give light blips of the throttle when you start the car in order to keep it running. You should get the low pressure fuel pump changed as soon as possible, but like I said, when the car warms up, it runs fine, so you can drive it to a shop. Some of you will find the blips on the throttle cringeworthy on the cold start, but for the purposes of this video, I've done it so that you guys can hear what the symptoms for this low pressure fuel pump one-way valve failure are. The blips given to the throttle are not far off from the factory high idle that this vehicle has in cold weather conditions. The high idle smooths out about a minute into the next clip. For those of you only interested in hearing the low pressure fuel pump one-way valve failure symptom, you can sign off at that point. Anyone else that wants to stick around and listen to some V8 high idle, I've left that part unedited. In a future video, we'll be removing the rear bench seat and replacing the low pressure fuel pump. It's important to complete this low pressure fuel pump repair, as the starvation of fuel even for a few seconds could possibly damage the high pressure fuel pumps and the injectors.